Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Appreciate it. Can you see the slides for mine right now? Okay. So I just wanted to touch on, I'm going to give a little bit of the background on McDaniel College, the MS in data analytics in that program. It does have CPT, and then halfway through, Colin's going to talk about the admissions process, the CPT policy. Colin's the one that issues I-20s. He deals with all the CPT stuff. So he's the expert on that stuff. So I'll hand over to him to talk about that. But I wanted to kind of touch on some of the high level points of the data analytics program at McDaniel College. So first off, a little bit of background on the college. It was established in 1867, so it has been around a really long time. It is a smaller private nonprofit institution. It does have about 20 graduate degrees in the university itself. It's about 3,000, just under 3,000 total students, of which 1,200 roughly are graduate students. It is accredited by Middle States Commission of Higher Education, which is the same accreditor that accredits NYU, Columbia, a lot of those universities in that same area. So it's been established a long time. It's an accredited university. The programs have been approved, all of that stuff. So some of the rankings and stuff like that on the university itself, you can see kind of U.S. News, regional universities in the north. It was ranked really well. It was ranked best value schools in the northern region. So really good rankings, really good kind of awards for the university. That's all on the university page itself. You can see that on the about page for McDaniel College. As far as the location, so it's located in Westminster, Maryland. It's about 45, 50 minutes from Baltimore. So for those of you not in the area, you would likely you'd probably fly into Baltimore, the BWI airport, and then it's about a 45, 50-minute ride to the university from there. You can also fly into Washington, D.C. There's Dulles Airport there. So there's those two options, as well as you can take the train to Owings Mill. So there are a few different transportation options to get there for the residency weekends on campus. The high level points of the program. So the one program you all are probably most interested in is the MS Data Analytics program. That is the only program approved for Day 1 CPT. So you can utilize CPT in a role that's related to the program. It is a 30 credit program. It typically takes 2 years to complete. The tuition for that is $689 per credit. So for the full program, it's just under $21,000. On a semester basis, it's about $4,100 per semester of tuition. And that's because you'll be taking 6 credits per semester. So 6 credits is set as the minimum full-time credit. So you would need to take 2 courses or 6 credits each semester. One of those courses will be fully online, and one of those courses will be a hybrid program where you'll go to campus 1 time per semester. So once a semester, you'll be on campus for 3 days. The rest of the coursework is online. So it allows flexibility for different work environments. You don't have to live right by the campus. You can fly into those residency weekends, all of that stuff. The CPT approval process, it is approved for 1 year at a time. So your first year will be approved. And then before that first year is up, you'll need to renew that CPT by doing the same process. So submitting your job description, what's your role, making sure that that directly applies to the degree itself. So typically anything related to business, anything where you do some analysis, you're involved with data, that stuff can typically be approved for CPT. And I'll let Colin get into that in more detail. He's the one that looks at all that stuff. But just kind of a high level, that's kind of what that looks like. As far as the residency weekend, so for your first semester, that will happen at the front of the semester. So the very first start, it's 3 days. It's not always a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, but we try to make it Friday, Saturday, Sunday as best we can. So, and then after that first semester, typically you will come to campus about the middle of each semester. You'll come for that residency weekend. So that's how that works. And then the summer program is, if summer is your first term, if it's your initial term, you do have to take 6 courses and go to class. But if it's your second term or it's a year later, summer is optional. You don't have to take courses over summer, but you can still apply for and utilize CPT. So typically we see a lot of students will start spring, take summer off, and then continue on from there. So that is an option to do. So those are kind of the high level points of the program itself. Here's a diagram of what the program looks like itself. So you can see the courses. So Foundations of Data Analytics data mining. So it builds on itself. If you don't have a data analytics background, that's okay, as long as you've got some strong math skills. If you've taken statistics in the past, that's kind of a good one to have. And then it'll build on itself to where you can understand data modeling, data visualization. Utilizing data in the business setting is kind of the focus of the program itself. And you can see the first course will be the hybrid program that will run for about 8 weeks. And then you'll take the fully online course the second part of that semester. So it's the semester's kind of split into 2 separate terms, and that's kind of how that runs. So you can see this one's an example. They start in summer, fall, spring. They would then take summer off and then go fall and then finish that next spring. So that's an example. If you started fall, it's kind of, you just shift it down another way. So that's what that looks like. The program itself, to be able to allow Day 1 CPT, it does have a requirement to do some form of experiential learning. So if you have a job that relates to the program, you're utilizing CPT, great, that checks that box. If you don't have a job though, that's okay too. What you would do is that first semester you would enroll in a research practicum. That is kind of like a mini internship. It allows you to apply the curriculum into more of a work setting, case studies, that type of stuff. So that way you meet that experiential learning requirement. If you then do find a job the second semester or something like that, you can then apply for CPT and utilize that when you do find the job. So you don't have to start with CPT and a job. But if you do find that later on, you can utilize CPT and jump into that CPT authorization when you find that job that applies to the degree. The practicum course is 0 credits, but you do have to enroll in either CPT 0 credit course or this practicum requirement course. So that's kind of the high level. Now we'll jump into admissions and I'll let Colin take over from there.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Hey, everybody. Thanks for being here, and appreciate Ryan and Brian for the invite. So my name's Colin. I work for the graduate admissions office at McDaniel. I'm also the DSO. So I work with students through the admissions process, through the I-20 process, and everything to get you on campus for that first residency. So just about the admissions requirements for the program, we do require a bachelor's degree with a grade point average of 3.0 or a foreign equivalent. We can usually calculate your GPA if you received a bachelor's degree outside the US. There are occasions where we need to ask for a credit evaluation or a transcript evaluation. We do also, on a case-by-case basis, allow for provisional admission for GPA that falls below a 3.0. But typically we look for that to be at least a 2.75 before in order to be considered. And again, that's on a case-by-case basis. We do also require English language proficiency, and you can see the scores that we accept there, the TOEFL, the IELTS, and the Duolingo. That requirement is waived if you have received a degree in the US. So if you've received a degree inside the US, then that requirement gets waived for you. Just some other things that you will need to upload into the application would be all of your transcripts from your previous academic work, bachelor's and a master's, if that is applicable to you. Unofficial transcripts are accepted for the admissions process, but official transcripts are needed before you can enroll in the program if you are admitted. If that is a degree that you received outside the United States, you can bring the hard copy of the official transcript with you to your first residency. We know that it can be often difficult to get those in time, so just want to make sure you have those with you. We also need a current resume, a copy of your passport, a copy of your visa, and like I mentioned, the English test, if that is applicable to you, and then a goal statement, just a one-page, couple paragraphs about your professional goals and how they relate to the program is recommended, but it's not required. So those are the admissions requirements. We can go ahead and flip to the next slide there, Brian. So this is, I won't go through all this, but this is just where you can apply. So if you go to admission.mcdaniel.edu/apply, it will take you to our application page. It is pretty straightforward, but can sometimes get a little bit confusing if you don't know where to go. So basically, you'll want to make sure that you create an account before you do anything else. You'll follow the link to create an account. You'll register with your basic information, and that is going to create an account for you that you will log in to throughout the admissions and enrollment process. So whatever login you create for the application is the same thing you'll use if you are admitted to the program to continue to complete the enrollment process. So you'll want to make sure you keep that information on hand. And if anybody is interested in applying and in this process, I'm happy to send that out as well. So we can go and flip to the next one there.
I think one thing to note on this
yeah.
too is Ryan from GoElite has created a really good video on how to apply. So it's a step-by-step of him actually going in through the process, where to select, all that stuff. So if any questions arise, that is a great video kind of source to be able to see where to go, what to select, all that stuff. So
that's great. Yeah.
Thank you, Brian. Just to add on to that just a little bit. So students, if you're in contact with us and you're interested in McDaniel College, I will be able to provide that application video guide to you, so you don't have to worry about, this complicated steps. Sometimes it will be pretty straightforward. And thank you for referencing Brian. Continue, Colin. I'm so sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Yeah, that's great. Sometimes our website can be a little more undergrad focused, and so it gets a little confusing where to go if you're applying for a graduate program. So that's great that you have that resource there, Ryan. This is some things that I already mentioned that we need in the application process, but also some documents to keep in mind that we will need in order for an I-20 to be issued. We do require financial support, a financial support form. We call it our statement of financial support. That is that shows who, if you're going to have a financial sponsor or if you are financially supporting yourself. We need to see proof of funds of at least $25,000 for the first year in order to issue an I-20, and that does need to be liquid accessible funds. And then if you do have a dependent, it's an additional $5,000 in proof of funds that we need to see. So we have a statement of financial support that you will need to complete and sign and have signed by any sponsors you have, and then upload along with current bank statements. And what we mean by current is that they need to be at least within the last 3 months of when your I-20 is going to be issued. So that is how current the bank statements need to be. And then if you are transferring your SEVIS record from another institution, then we have a transfer form that you will complete along with your DSO from your previous institution so that they can initiate that transfer process. I'll touch a little bit on this in a minute as well, but if you are transferring your SEVIS record will need to be transferred to McDaniel no later than the start date of the program, particularly if you are currently on OPT and your OPT does not expire before the program begins. You can have your SEVIS record transferred to us the day before or the day of the start of the program, and we can issue your I-20 and start your CPT with no gap in your employment. So that's important to note as well. Brian, we can go ahead. Awesome. So after admission, if you are admitted to the program, I should note that we do not have any application fees at McDaniel. The first fee that you would have would be an initial deposit, and that is a $250 deposit, which is applied to your first semester of tuition. This is what secures your seat in the program. We do have a very competitive program. Gaining admission does not guarantee you a spot in the program, but submitting that deposit is what does. So after you submit that deposit, then you are going to receive instructions on how to set up your McDaniel student account. We call that your My McDaniel account. That will also set up your student email address, which is where all official communication will come through from our graduate office, professors, everybody that you'll interact with in the program will use your McDaniel student account. So it's very important to get that set up as quickly as possible. You'll also need to complete all of the necessary documents for that I-20, like I just talked about. So that financial support form, bank statements, your transfer form, and then your CPT application and agreement form, which I'm going to touch on next as well. But that all happens after that deposit is paid. And so that is after admission, that is your next step, because we really can't move forward until you've secured that spot with your deposit. All right. So just continuing with after admission, all students are registered for classes by our Graduate and Professional Studies office. So you don't have to worry about course registration because the program is a cohort model, meaning you're going to be going through the program with those students that you start with in your initial residency, and everybody will follow the same course sequence as Brian laid out. So we register all students for classes. And for CPT, if you are applying for CPT, what's included is it is a completed and signed CPT agreement form, which we provide after you've submitted that deposit. And that needs to be signed by you and your employer and uploaded to your portal, which is where you log in to apply. And it's the same portal that you'll use throughout this process. You'll need to upload that CPT agreement form with a current official signed offer letter from your employer on company letterhead, and a current and dated job description on company letterhead as well. We have been discussing this lately, and one of the things that we're starting to ask for is that your offer letter be updated with a date that matches your admission to the program, or a verification letter from your employer stating that you still currently hold that position. So if you have an offer letter that you've been in your job for 2 years and your offer letter is dated from 2 years ago, we ask for an updated offer letter or a verification letter from your employer stating that you still currently hold that position. As I mentioned before, sorry, I'm just flip back for just 1 second. For students with OPT, just want you to be aware of some dates coming up for your transfer. Like I said, if you're transferring your SEVIS record, it should be no later than the start date of your program. So we have our summer semester is coming up starting on May 20th. And then fall was going to start on August 16th. And those are the dates that you would be on campus for your initial residency as well. So just want to make sure you're aware of those dates. All right, we can go ahead. Great. So how to pay. This is what everybody wants to know and the questions I answer often. So Brian mentioned the tuition per credit hour is currently $689. We do have some fees as well. So there's an administrative fee of $105 per semester, a practicum fee of $200 per practicum. What that means is if you are on CPT, that is going to be a per semester fee of $200. But if you are not working on CPT and you're doing that research-based practicum, then that is actually a $200 per course or per term for that fee. And then the residency fee is $204 per residency. There's 5 total residencies throughout the program. And then I mentioned that $250 deposit that is applied towards your first semester of tuition. And those bills are available through your My McDaniel account. That's the account that you'll set up after you're admitted and deposited. You can see there checks can be made payable to McDaniel College, the Bursar's office. You can also pay your bills online. And then the payment schedule, a lot of people ask me if we have a payment plan. So while we don't have a traditional payment plan, your payment is made on a course-by-course basis, and it's due 10 days prior to the start of each course. So that means you're making a payment roughly once every 8 weeks. So it kind of works out to be a payment plan, but that's the payment schedule. All right. And then just planning for the residency, getting to campus, what does that look like? Do we have housing, transportation, those types of things? So McDaniel does not provide housing on campus for the residencies, but we do arrange for hotel rooms at a couple of nearby hotels. We are a pretty small community, we're located in Westminster, which is a small town in Maryland. Like Brian said, about 45 minutes from Baltimore. So we do negotiate a discounted rate at some local hotels for students. So students are responsible for booking their hotel room, but information is provided for students so that you know where to do that and when to do that. We do recommend that you arrive and plan your travel the night before the first residency day because we begin promptly at usually 8 or 9 a.m. is when you'll check in for residency. So just make sure to mark your calendar for those dates, May 19th to the 23rd. The residency, if you're interested in summer, is May 20, 21, and 22. And so you'll want to plan for your travel as well. For transportation from the airport, we do provide a shuttle service one time only the evening before the residency begins, only from BWI, which is the Baltimore airport. So we do not provide transportation from the Dulles airport in Washington, D.C., but just from BWI. And again, you'll receive more information for on that closer to the date. Just food, attire, food, parking, all of that will be covered. We do an information session for deposited students as we get closer to that date as well. So you'll get more information on that as needed. All right.
So thanks for all the details, Colin, on the admission stuff. Before we jump into the Q&A, I just wanted to kind of summarize some of the questions we typically get. We've gone over most of this information, but just to kind of refresh on some of the key points that we typically do see. So the cost, we've talked about this a few times. So currently the rate is $689 per credit. Colin went through some of the additional fees and stuff on a termly basis. It is a pretty affordable program when you look at it over a 2-year program. It's a pretty reasonably priced program for what you get. So the I-20 funding requirement. So what you need to show for financial support is $25,000 for yourself. Any additional dependents you have on your I-20, it's $5,000 for each additional dependent. So the on-site requirement. So this is the residency weekend. So it is 3 days, but it is only one time per semester. So if you're taking summers off, it's basically twice a year. You've got to go for fall, spring, and you can take summer off. So just remember, once a semester, you do need to be on campus. That is mandatory for F1 visa holders. The summer semester, so this one is optional unless it is your first term. And you can still utilize CPT over summer if it's not your first term. You can apply for that.
Hey, Brian, can I jump in here on that point? Yep. Unless it's changed, I could be wrong, but I believe the SEVIS requirement is to have 2 full-time semesters before you can take a break in coursework, which would mean that if you're starting in spring, you would need to do spring and summer, and then the following summer you'd be able to take a summer off. I could be wrong about that if that's changed recently, but
Okay. I think it's something we should look into because typically it's based on the university policy for summer. So if summer is
okay.
a mandatory semester, then yeah, that's the case. But if it's an optional semester, which I believe it is in this program, then you should be able to take that off. But let me follow up and
Yep,
confirm that.
no worries.
Okay. Start date's summer, May 20th is the first day of class. So that's the first day you could have CPT. You can't utilize CPT before the program starts. It can only start on that first day of class. Fall starts August 16th. So that would be the first day for that program. SEVIS transfer. So Colin's willing to do it the day before or the day of. So that's fantastic. So you could potentially have no gap in your employment, which is a pretty strong selling point for it. So you just need to make sure you schedule your I-20 transfer before and you have everything approved, submitted, so that way it can all happen that same day. CBT is authorized for 1 year at a time, and then it'll be renewed for that second year of the program to finish it out. So those are kind of the big FAQ questions we get, but we can jump into more of the Q&A and go from there. So I'll hand it over to you, Ryan.
Absolutely. I want to thank Colin and Brian for your presentation. That was excellent. And we do have a couple of questions from our student side. And for every attendees, I do want to encourage you to ask questions. We have our DSO as well as the admissions here, so they can answer all the questions you have for the program. And let's just jump into the first questions. So are there any additional fees other than the fees for the tuition credits?
Yeah, so I think that's one that Colin touched on. So each semester, do you want to run through those, Colin? There's the admin fee and then also the residency fee. You're on mute, Colin.
Sorry, thanks. So there's the administrative fee, there's the residency fee, and then there's also the practicum fee. So those three fees total about around $500 a semester.
And did you, Colin, just curious, did you also mention something about food and also, those being covered during their residency or no?
Yeah, so during the residency, the I'm not entirely sure what meals are covered, but I know that there are at least lunches covered each day of the residency.
That's
Yep.
good. Good to know. Thank you. Moving on to our next questions. So after CPT, after I'm used CPT for a year, does the analytics program allow stand OPT after?
Yes. So Brian, did you want me to take this or?
Yeah, if you want, I can touch on it too.
Sure,
You go for it,
sure.
Noel.
Yep. So after you use CPT, we are a STEM designated program, so you can apply for the 2-year STEM extension for your OPT. The important thing that I make sure to tell people with CPT is that there is a limit to the amount of full-time CPT that you can have and still be eligible for post-completion OPT. So your full-time CPT needs to be less than 12 months in order to still be eligible for post-completion OPT. So since we are a 2-year program, what a lot of students will do is in that first year, do just under 12 months of full-time CPT. And then for the second year of the program, work part-time on CPT, and then you are eligible for that OPT. But if you're in full-time CPT for those full 2 years, then you waive your eligibility for any OPT after completing the program.
Brian, did you have anything else to add?
Brian, can you clarify on the and if you already have used your OPT and you say this is your second master's and you've used your OPT, this is not, you don't get additional OPT to this. If you've already used it at the master's level, that's it. And so we see a lot of students that utilize full-time OPT throughout the program, knowing that their OPT has already been used at the master's level. So that's just important to note. The one that Brian and Colin explained are more for if this is your first master's and you're looking to preserve your OPT, then yes, you need to be very conscious about how much you're using. But if this is your second master's and you're no longer eligible for additional OPT, then students usually use full-time throughout.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good
Thanks,
point.
Corey.
Absolutely. Thank you for your comments on the OPT master situation, Corey. And moving on to our next question. Are there any restrictions on traveling outside of the country while I'm doing my CPT?
I'm happy to jump in here again. Yeah, so you can travel outside the US while you are on CPT, while you're in the program. You need to, if you're going to do that, you need to request a travel signature to be put on your I-20 by the DSO. If you're requesting that before the program, it will be me. I should have mentioned before, I work with students through the admission process. Once you're in the program, we have a DSO in our graduate office that will work with you. Her name is Beth King, and she would be that DSO that would provide that travel signature. The important thing to note is if you do not have a valid visa, I would recommend not traveling outside the country because if your visa is expired, you cannot re-enter on an expired visa. You'd have to renew your visa or go through the visa process all over again. So you want to make sure that you have a valid visa before you consider traveling.
Yeah, I think that's really the key is before you do travel outside the country, meet with Beth King, the DSO, to ensure you've got all the paperwork, your visa is still valid, everything is kind of ready to go. The other thing Colin mentioned too is if your visa is expired, you can remain in the country as long as your I-20 is active, you're still in the program, that is fine. The first time you travel outside of the country, though, you would need to go to a visa interview at the local embassy in your home country. So if you are planning on traveling, your visa has expired, make sure that you have a plan to get that visa renewed before you come back, because you can't come back until you get that visa renewal.
Absolutely. Thank both of you guys for that. Moving on, this person actually have two questions. So the first one would be, can an applicant without any background in programming or data science apply for this program in particular, which is the MS Analytics program?
So I think this one is fine if you don't have that background. Typically, you do need to show that you've taken statistics before. As long as you've done statistics and done okay in that course, then that is fine. As I said earlier, it is kind of a stair-step process where you'll start out with the basics of data analytics and then build from there. And so that way you'll be able to slowly understand more of the programming and coding. You're not going to get a ton into the coding. You're not going to have to be coding 24/7. It's not a program like that. But it is okay if you're a business background to jump into this program. I think you'll be fine as long as you're strong in math. So I think that one's fine. As far as doing more than 6 credits, so typically it is a cohort-based model where you'll take the same two courses that are kind of laid out in the program. You could potentially talk to an academic advisor to see if they could approve you for that if you're doing really well in the program. But I wouldn't say it's a common thing. So you could work with an academic advisor once you're approved of the program and all that, but I wouldn't promise that, yeah, you're going to be able to do 12 credits a semester.
Okay.
Sorry, one thing done there too. So the only time we really see it with, to Brian's point, if it is an accelerated where you're taking 9 or more credits, again, yes, talk to academic advisor. The scenario we normally see with this are students that are wanting to accelerate so that, again, it becomes back to the full-time CPT. And if you're able to accelerate it where then you're able to be in CPT, your program can be condensed. So the full-time CPT, you're kind of utilizing that more without kind of going over that 12-month being in full-time CPT. Again, it's rare, so it's case-by-case basis, and it's something you need to talk to your academic advisor. We see it, but those are usually the scenarios where we see it.
Sure. Thank you, guys. Moving on to the next question. I think we already talked about this, but just to confirm, is the CPT program stand certified? I think the answer is
Yes. Yes.
Yes, yes, it is.
as Corey mentioned though. So if this is your first US master, you are eligible for a stand OPT after you graduate from the program, as long as you don't do a full-time CPT for more than 12 months. Moving on to the next question, is the Master of Data Analytics the only day one CPT program at McDaniel?
Currently, yes, it's the only one approved for day one CPT, correct.
All right, sounds good. Next question, I'm currently on a special visa, which allows a work permit. If I switch to F1 visa, then what would be, the switch process looking like?
So to do that, if you're on an H visa, for example, or I guess kind of any of those other similar visas, you would need to apply to the program, get admitted to the program, and then apply for a visa change of status. That change of status can take some time, and until the F1 visa is approved, you cannot use CPT. Once you are approved for the F1 visa, you then could apply for and utilize CPT at that point. So there are some visas that you can start studying. You could start the program under the visa and study not utilize CPT. And then once your F visa does come through, then kind of apply for the CPT at that point. So
Absolutely. And also I wanted to ask, for those change of status applicants, will they be allowed to start their CPT once they become F1, or are they gonna, take 1 or 2 semester of classes before they start their CPT?
So unless there's any changes, Colin, my understanding is as soon as they're approved for the F1 visa, if they have a job that's related to the program, they could utilize CPT at that point.
Yes, that's correct.
Sounds good. Good to know. Moving on to our next question. So any substitution to the CPT agreement, if my manager can sign that for me, what would my plan be?
Yeah, so we've had this situation before. There are certain companies that we know won't sign those agreement forms. We ask for that form to still be completed in full with the student's signature, and that we have those other forms that we need, the official job description and offer letter, to make sure that those are official on company letterhead, that we have contact information for the supervisors so that we can verify employment. All of those things, we will accept that. But that's usually more rare than not.
Yeah, I'd say most employers we've found okay with
Mhm.
signing the cooperative agreement. It's basically laying out what's your job title, where are you working, who's your supervisor, kind of the basic information. But as Colin said, if for some reason they're really not able to sign that, they're putting their foot down, we do need to just see all the other information with the current job description and all that stuff detailed out, and then have the student sign that section. So preferably try to get that signed by your manager, though. That is the ideal way to go. Just because if you do go for an H-1B, it's good to have that document on hand, on record, all that stuff. So that's why we try to get that up front.
Absolutely. One thing I wanted to add from our end is that when we're talking to some of the students, the reason why their employer isn't willing to sign this form is because they don't understand what CPT is. So if you do run into this kind of situation, I do recommend you to scan the QR code, talk to our consultant, and they will give you instructions on how to basically talk and also explain the CPT situation is a little bit clearer to your employer. And as long as it's a hard no according to the HR policy, chances are our students can convince their employer to sign the CPT agreements. They just want the employer to understand a little bit more about what actually is curriculum, practical training, and the steps that come forward with that. And moving on to our next question. So do you have MBA or other master's program? I think we kind of talked about this already. So the MS Analytics program will currently be the only program that allows day one CPT. And if the person got an MSBA degree, can I also do this program? I think that would be the question that we wanted to answer here.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of overlap between the two degrees, but you could apply for and still do the data analytics program.
All right. I think I would recommend students to check, the curriculum settings of the courses and to see specifically if there's a significant overlap. If no, I think you're more than okay to apply for the analytics program. And moving on, does McDaniel provide any forms of scholarship?
So unfortunately, there's no scholarship on the data analytics program. So currently there's no scholarship for it. So
Okay, sounds good. Next question. So, what is the application deadline for CPT for every semester?
So roughly, I'd say it's about a month before the start of the program. So for summer, the deadline to apply for the May 20th start is currently April 20th.
Mhm.
We prefer students apply earlier than that. That is kind of the drop dead deadline, and it does get a little tight for the I-20 transfer and CPT approval. So preferably, I'd say try to apply 2 months before the start of the program or more. But for the summer program, I do understand people are waiting for the H-1B results. So if you, as soon as you find out your results, please start your application, get that in. But the drop dead deadline is April 20th for the summer start.
And one thing I want to add, and Colin has mentioned it, I think Brian might have mentioned it, but we do encourage, as Brian said, as early as possible. I just want to reiterate that there are no application fees. So just to be able to apply, there's no fees. It's really straightforward. It's just filling out the application with some basic information about yourself, your transcripts, your resume. Your English will likely be waived if you have the US degree. So it is pretty straightforward and there's no fees. And then you can be admitted and you kind of know you have a program. Even before the H-1B lottery. So a lot of times I encourage students to do that because then you kind of have a plan in place with no real fees, maybe 20 minutes out of your day to actually go through the application process.
Mm-hmm. And I'll just a clarifying point on this question because it does ask for if there's a CPT deadline for every semester. So just a reminder that when you apply for CPT at the beginning of the program, it is good for up to 1 year. For that first year of the program, and then you will renew that CPT for the second year of the program, whether that's full-time or part-time. So you don't need to apply for CPT every semester unless you have a change in your employment for some reason. Then you'll need to reapply for that CPT.
Sounds good. Next question: can I ask for a semester leave? After finishing one academic year and this person wanted to extend the program as much as he or she can.
I think they're using the summer terms as your kind of break periods is the way to do that. We try to keep it cohort based so the group stays together and it's kind of laid out. So preferably that's kind of structure is if you can use the summer semesters as your break period after an academic year, that's kind of the way to go. If there's some special case circumstancing comes up, family emergency or something like that, you would need to work with the DSO and an academic advisor for that approval. But I would say try to use those summers more than anything for that break period.
Sounds good. Moving on, we have a specific situation. So this student is under OPT and his or her current job is ending by the end of this month, March. And I'm actually really looking for a new job at the moment. Am I still eligible if I don't have a job to apply for CPT? And also, should I wait until I get my next offer to apply for, the program and CPT?
So you could apply for the program and start the program. You wouldn't be able to utilize CPT until you have a job offer though.
Mhm.
So my recommendation, I mean, I don't fully understand your whole visa situation, but I would assume you're going to need to do something. Otherwise, you'll have to leave the country. So by applying to the program, getting admitted, you can stay in the country, you can start the program. And then if you find a job before May 20th, you can actually start the program with CPT. Or if you find it in June or July, you can then apply for CPT at that point. But I would suggest starting the program in the summer term, so the May 20th start, with the idea of continuing to look for a job to then utilize CPT when you find that job.
Yeah, and just to clarify here, so because we do have students in this situation. So yeah, so if your OPT is ending in March, you'll still have a month and a half to be actively looking for a job. You're going to be able to stay in good status. You'll be still within your grace period because the next start is summer. So it's nothing to worry about. You can still continue to stay in the US. I would just say actively, really, that month and a half, really actively look for a job and get your job description and just be upfront and clear with your employer that you won't be able to start working until the start date of the program, but that doesn't stop you from still actively looking, finding a job, just knowing that you're not going to be able to start and your employer understands that at the first May 20th, and then you can actually start working. But all the other stuff up between, be actively looking, and then you can start the program and do CPT from the very start.
Absolutely, that's a great point. And moving on to the next question, is it necessary that the CPT work has to be in line with the degree? Or in other words, can they be in different fields? How much leeway do we have on that?
I mean, there does need to be some relationship to the degree. With that being said, I feel like a lot of jobs nowadays have a lot more data involvement. So your job title doesn't have to necessarily say data analyst. It can say a lot of different things. But if on a day-to-day on a task or a weekly task, you have some involvement with data or some sort of analysis, it could be in the business field. I mean, it could be fairly broad, but there needs to be analysis or data or some business type of role that you are doing in your job to be able to qualify for CPT.
Sounds good.
I would say if you have a question on it, either talk to us about it up front, or you can apply, submit the CPT documents. We can look at it and say, yeah, that should be fine. But I would say it's pretty broad, the things we can typically approve in kind of the business field, in computer science, data, that type of stuff. But I'd say let us look at it and we can kind of give you an idea of if it would be approved or not. Or Ryan and his team can do the same.
Yeah, and I can speak to that process really briefly. When you upload your documents for CPT, I take a look at those. I make sure that everything looks good. I might come back to you and say, hey, we're missing a signature here, or you need to correct these dates or something like that. But then I send those to our program coordinators for review, and they are the ones who ultimately make the approval decision for CPTs. So they look at that in alignment with the program goals and make that decision.
Sounds good. Next question. So this person wanted to know, what if my GPA is lower than 3.0, within this program, what will happen?
So I think Colin touched on this earlier, that so any student that's below a 3.0, I would recommend submitting a personal statement or the statement of goals along with your application. If you have a 2.75 or higher, you can still be admitted provisionally, but typically you want to show a strong resume, a statement of goals of kind of the reasoning why your GPA was a little bit lower, what you're doing to correct that, and how you'll be successful in the program. So if your GPA drops below a 3.0 while you're in the program, a lot of times you will be put on academic probation. So you'll need to work with your academic advisor to make sure that you get your GPA up the next semester. So you can't continually have a 2.5 GPA and continue in the program. You will be able to do it for one semester, but beyond that, it gets a little bit tricky. So try to keep your GPA above a 3.0 in the program, and you'll be fine.
So just to clarify, students will usually get one semester of a grace, something like a grace period, for them to get their GPA back up above 3.0.
Correct.
Okay, good to know. And moving on, next question. What if I forgot to renew my CPT and actually worked for a couple of days? Did you guys run into this kind of situation?
I don't know if I've seen the outcome of this. Obviously, we recommend do not do this. Try to make sure you're on top of your OPT end dates, and when CPT starts, make sure you're renewing everything. The issue would likely come up when you go for your H-1B. You might get an RFE about what happened there. So, but I haven't seen kind of the results of that. I don't know if you have, Colin.
I haven't, mostly because I'm working with students on the front end of the program and not while you're in the program. I haven't seen this. I I could also see it having an impact on future visa interviews if you are in that situation where you need to renew your visa. They're going to kind of comb through everything, make sure that you've remained in status. So you want to make sure that you just keep track of all that, like Brian said.
And we know this is important. So they will be sending you information ahead of, before that year. And I know that they try to do it with enough time where it's not like a last minute scramble. So you'll likely get multiple reminders about it. So again, it comes back to making sure that you're staying in contact, you're checking your emails, you're checking your student accounts. And you if you're doing that, then you should be well aware of it. And it's not a complicated process at all. So just as long as you're staying active in the program and checking all of your emails and other contact information, you should be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
And that is one advantage of this program with CPT being approved for 1 year at a time. I know some other institutions approve each term. So term by term, you're constantly renewing. So by getting your CPT approved for 1 year, you only have to renew one time in this program. And that will be with Beth King, the DSO. So it's the same one if you travel. She's going to be dealing with the CPT renewals, DSO, like the travel stuff too. So it shouldn't be an issue, but just make sure you are on top of that.
Absolutely. Moving on, we have a question regarding if I receive an RFE during the H-1B application, can McDaniel support me with any kinds of documentations?
So I think because you're on the front end, Colin, it would be Beth that would be dealing with all of any RFE stuff that comes up. I know we have heard from other students at other programs that sometimes they'll ask about university policy around CPT and stuff like that. So all of that, transcripts, all the information that may come up around kind of your study, the policy on CPT, the policy on the program itself. I mean, that can all be supported by Beth on kind of on the university side. So,
and I know another common one is they will keep your attendance records, especially for the residency weekends. So make sure to come to the residency weekends. Those are important. Those are common RFE ones that they'll want to see. McDaniel will keep all of those records for you, and they'll support you with anything that you need. But you just need to make sure that you are coming to the residency weekends, you are checking in, you are, getting your attendance, so that come an RFE, McDaniel will be able to support you with all of that as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Moving on to the next question. So I'm currently on a F2 visa. Is it possible to switch to F1 without going outside of the US and start the program?
So it's on an F2, it is possible to switch to an F1 without going outside the US. It is typically a lengthy process. So that can affect your start date, because an F2 is one of those visa types that you are not able to begin studying on, if I remember correctly. So if you're switching from an H-1B, it's a different story, because you can study on an H-1B, but you cannot study on an F-2. So if you start the change of status process and you don't get your F-1 before the start date of the program, you can defer your your start to the next semester while you wait for that change of status.
Yeah, and it's the lengthy process is not like a very intensive process on your end. It's more of there's just a backlog on them reviewing the change of status forms. So you'll get admitted to the program, you'll get your I-20, you'll then submit for a change of status, and then you'll just kind of wait. You can stay in the US, you can do what you're doing, but you are just going to have to wait for that response to come. And that's where it does take time.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. And I also wanted to add a little note to that change of status process is that we do run into students, for example, from an F2 background or an H4 background sponsor spouse visas. Once they wanted to change to F1 using the change of status application, they can actually premium process to change to F1. So instead of the normal 3 to 6 month, they can actually get their result out within a month if they choose to do the premium processing with the USCIS. So in that case, the time management that you can do get enroll into the school will be better because you get a better picture of when your F1 is going to be effective, but you do gonna pay to the USCIS for a certain amount of fee, but it is possible. And moving on to our second to last question, does the CPT employer has to be an E-verified company?
I don't believe they do need to be E-verified. I know for OPT, they need to be E-verified, but I don't believe they do for CPT. I'm not positive on that.
I'm pretty sure that's correct, Brian. I think obviously if you're going for an H-1B, that's a different story, and you want to, if that's your future plan, I think you obviously would want to be with an E-verified employer. But correct, as Brian said, I don't believe, at least for CPT, because it's a working agreement between the university and the employer, and I don't think it has, the E-verify has anything to do with the CPT part. But again, H-1B, all that sort of stuff is a different situation.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with what that means, so that probably means it's not. It's not a requirement.
Good to know. So for our side, our students does ask these questions regarding the E-verify a lot. So for now, and according to the research that we did with USCIS, is that their official website stated that the E-verify would be more on the side of the STAN OPT. So for example, if you're doing a STAN OPT, you're applying for your OPT extension, you have to go with the E-verify sponsor or E-verify employer in order to continue using your or start to using your STAN OPT. But it's not the case with CPT or with H-1B. Actually, CPT and H-1B doesn't require the employees to have an E-verify sponsor in that case. So you can rest assured that when you're doing your CPT, you don't have to have a E-verify sponsor in that case. And for our last question, if I work on a full-time CPT during the summer break, would that also be counted towards the 12-month full-time CPT time before applying for an OPT?
Yeah, so anytime you use CPT, it doesn't matter if you're on break or not, it does count towards that 12 months. So, and the other thing too to remember on this, if you lose your job, make sure you update your CPT status with the DSO very quickly, because even if you lose your job but your CPT is still running because it was approved for a year, that will be counting towards your 12 months. So make sure your CPT is always up to date. If you go to part-time, which is anything under 20 hours a week, make sure you update that as well, because the 12 months is just full-time CPT. So you could do 12 months of part-time CPT and then 11 months of full-time CPT and still be eligible for the OPT after you graduate. So
yeah, and one small note is that we do not recommend students to actually take the full 12-month, even though it's in the guideline that you cannot exceed the 12-month requirements for doing a full-time CPT, but we don't recommend students to do 12-month completely for that CPT tuition. Probably 11-month will be more logical in your case.
Yeah.
Yes, and I think that will be all of our questions. We do have lots of high quality questions that we got to answer for our students, so that is good. And before we wrap up, I do want to thank Colin and Brian and Corey to hop on the call to talk about the programs, explain a little bit more about CPT, and also answer straight questions from our students. And I do wanted to appreciate everybody for coming in and ask your questions in our session. And hopefully, if you do have other questions, please talk to our consultant so we can follow up to answer more questions from you and also connect you with the school admissions. Thank you guys for attending. Thank you, Colin. Thank you, Corey.
Thank you.
Ryan.
Thanks for having us, Ryan. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone.
Everybody. Take care. Have a